unions, we work with student activists, within in a broader spectrum of other organizations and civil society organizations as well. Those who identify with our cause, of course, we work with them in the continent. We have started a webinar series since the start of the novel coronavirus. Last year, we discussed a range of things from different walks of life with different guests to speak about different things, particularly on international solidarity. Today, we are joined by Solani Mkiva, a South African activist, an arts activist, an international solidarity activist, a member of parliament, and an activist in the traditional sector in South Africa. He joins us to speak about solidarity, South Africa's solidarity with Venezuela. He's also the chairperson of the South African Union of Solidarity with Venezuela, SASUVI. I'm sure, I think I'm saying it right. Comrade Zorandi, thank you for joining this webinar series. It's a pleasure, it's an honor as well to have you. To our audience, just tell us a bit about yourself. Who's Zorandi Mkiva?
Well, let me start off by saying, perhaps, in Madiba's words, that our freedom in South Africa is incomplete without the freedom of Palestine. And to us, the people of Palestine have grown beyond just being friends to us. They are now family. And therefore, the just struggle that you are pursuing in all fronts, including in this instrument, Africa for Palestine, is fully supported wholeheartedly by all of us in South Africa and across the length and the breadth of Africa. I am Zorani Mkiva, as you have introduced me, and I come from the Dutwa, and in a village there called Bolotwa, Eastern Cape province of South Africa. I grew up in the Bundus, looking after the livestock of my father like any other boy. But I went to school, and until I reached university, which was at the University of the Western Cape. My activism began at high school as a member of the Congress of South African Students, and I became a leader at that level, which made me both the SRC president at high school, St. John's College, as well as the chairperson of COSAS. Then I moved to do my my degree after matric at the University of Western Cape, which was one of the theater of our struggle, particularly in that province, because it was a catchment area which made it easy for comrades to mobilize the students, the young intellectuals, to be part and parcel of the mass democratic movement as spearheaded by the United Democratic Front during those times, early 80s, early 90s. So I'm happy that I was part of that struggle, and I grew up in the struggle, and I think I cut my political teeth right as part and parcel of the tortuous bearers who were raising their hands against the vicious apartheid system. In that way, that makes me as part and parcel of one of the young people who played a role in the demise of apartheid. But I must say that in 1989, when the first political prisoners were released, led by Comrade Walter Sisulu, Raymond Mhlaba, Wilton Mkwai, and many others, I was there as an artist, as a praise poet, and I welcomed them in the then Transkei, in a stadium called the Independence Stadium then, which is no longer in existence. And then when Madiba was released the following year, I was also given a privilege and an honor by the leaders who were part and parcel of the organizing committee to welcome Madiba after his release. So from there on, I connected with Madiba, and I started working with him as a young man at the age of 16, traveling with him across the length and the breadth of the country, introducing him in a traditional and a cultural way, which he had known long before he went to prison. So I was carrying with me an embodiment of the institution of traditional leadership, which Madiba also says it also helped him to actually systematize his thinking and for him to become the balanced leader that he was. He understood the rural struggles, he understood the urban issues, so he was a complete balanced leader. I happen to come from a rural area, but I have lived and I have traveled in the cities. So in that way, that's how I would define myself. I think your introduction actually hit the nail right in the head.
Thank you very much, Comrade Zalani. This gives a personal touch to our audience also to know who they are talking to, who they are listening to. Pardon me. Comrade Zalani, we hear a lot about Venezuela and not so much, but those that are activists hear about it in their political circles, in their solidarity circles. We don't hear much of it in the news. You won't see much on ACBC. You won't see much of it on CNN, unless it's a really negative story. So if you can just please tell us the historical context of South Africa's solidarity with Venezuela, particularly for the young comrades and young activists who have joined this webinar series. Just give us that historical context, that historical relationship.
Yeah, I don't know where to start because it's a long one. I can trace it back during the time when Simon Bolivar and his compatriots were fighting for the liberation of the Greater Colombia. And we are inspired by that struggle because it is linked to the struggle of Cuba, for instance, long before Fidel Castro. In Venezuela in particular, let me focus on that Simon Bolivar and his comrades disassociated themselves with Spain. As you know, that some of them were originally Spaniards. But when they realized that the brutality of the system, which was genocidal against the Aborigines of the South America, amongst other things, and many wrong things that were happening in that colonial state, Simon Bolivar took a decision together with his comrades to liberate the Greater Colombia. And in liberating Greater Colombia, he decided to take everybody with himself, took the entire population in that landscape into his confidence, indiscriminately. He introduced non-racialism way back during that time. He introduced inclusive growth of that community, which is now I refer to as Greater Colombia. That is why Simon Bolivar is saluted, not only by Venezuelans, but all the people in that region who form part and parcel of the original greater state called Greater Colombia, which included Colombia today, which included Peru and many other states around there. Until then, the focal point has always been Caracas, which was the capital of the Greater Colombia. So we are inspired by all the policy perspectives which were displayed by the leadership of Simon Bolivar. But I think I must say that amongst the population in what is known as Greater Colombia, there were many Africans, people who had gone to that area as slaves. And they were freed immediately under the leadership of Simon Bolivar. They formed part and parcel of the citizenry of that. And they immediately made links with us as Africans in the mother continent. So I can trace it back from there. But I think the moment of glory, which makes us to be very much sentimental attached to Venezuela in particular, was the rise of Hugo Chavez. Because I think Hugo Chavez, with the work that was started by the ancestor Simon Bolivar, I think he took it to the highest level and mainstreamed it for the whole world to look at Venezuela as a focal point in the South Americas, as a torchbearer, as a country that leads from the front as a power broker, you understand, in terms of the system of community management, the way that they manage the national question, socialism, and so on and so forth, ensuring that the means of production are commonly owned by the people. The liberation of the economic sector of Venezuela, ensuring that the natural resources of Venezuela are taken away from imperialists back into the hands of the citizens of that country. And the massive work that happened under the leadership of Comrade Hugo Chavez, including building more than 14 universities, ensuring that in each and every region of Venezuela, there was a university, wherein there was not prior to his ascending to power. Today, we're talking about a society with a rate of literacy above 80% because of that kind of visionary leadership of Hugo Chavez. But one thing that Hugo Chavez did, he knew that he himself has African blood in him. And therefore, he immediately established diplomatic ties with the African continent at large. And those diplomatic ties were not just government to government. They were government to government in terms of state protocol, but they also ensured people to people relations. And he did that in a very efficient way, in a very seamless way. And that strike a chord with us, that we saw Venezuela as a strategic friend, but also as a very strong solidarity partner for us, because in Venezuela, we look at Venezuela and we see ourselves in the mirror. That's how we look at Venezuela. That is the attachment that comes a long way. So we are sentimental about our relationship with them. And I think our relationship is not only political. We are related to the people of Venezuela, yes, politically, even though geographically we are far apart from each other. But if you look at the South to South relations, that's where we connect. But we're also related to them culturally. We're also related to them biologically, by blood. Because as I say, there are many of the leaders, including Hugo Chavez, that have, blood relations with Africa. In that way, our relationship is an all-rounder kind of a relationship. So it is for that reason that we support the people of Venezuela, the government of Venezuela, and the current leader of Venezuela, who was a deputy to Hugo Chavez, very close buddy, very close comrade, who understand the mission, the vision, and the strategic goal that needs to be achieved. And that's none other than President Nicolas Maduro.
Thanks for that, Congressman. Like I said, many people don't know about what's happening in Venezuela. It's deliberate from the Western media, it's deliberate from the Western influence in the world. Now, just take us through a short discourse of what is happening currently in Venezuela, and also what led to the formation of the organization that you belong to, that you formed in South Africa. Just give us a short discourse of that, Congressman.
Look, my brother, Venezuela is a very rich country. It is endowed with mineral resources, including gas and oil. There is gold in Venezuela. There is iron ore in Venezuela. There is everything that you can think of, which are the items, the precious metals that are in demand in the world out there. Now, the Western powers think that they have a right to those resources, which is what Comrade Hugo Chavez fought against and ensured that he takes that wealth to the hands. So it is the struggle by the imperialists to take over that wealth. That is what is happening. And because the government and the people of Venezuela says, hell no, this belongs to us and you will never have it again. It must be firmly be entrenched in our hands for the benefit and the beneficiation of our own society. And that makes them an enemy of imperialists because of the stance that they take, and which is a correct stance. Because for how long, with the resources that they have and that they own, the factors and the means, can be exploited by imperialists, to the disadvantage of their own people. So they have taken a decision, a firm decision, and that stance we fully support, because it is that what we want to happen even in our own shores here in Africa. We want the mineral wealth, the oil resources, the energy complex at large to belong to the Africans, not only in paper, but in terms of the means and the factors of production. We want local beneficiation. And that is what Venezuela represents. It is for that reason that they are hated by the United States of America. It is for that reason that they are hated by some of the Western regimes. But even though they are hated by the administration of the USA, the people on the ground in the United States of America are sympathetic to the cause of the Venezuelans. The people on the ground, even in the Western powers, they don't approve of what the governments are doing against Venezuela. Because these sanctions that we have now in Venezuela are as a result of a strike by imperialists against a progressive government in the form of the government of President Maduro. So in Venezuela, the economy has been squeezed as a result of these criminal and illegitimate sanctions which have been applied by the Western powers, which are not approved by any international body. And these sanctions are against the spirit of international rule and international law. And it is terrorist governments of the West that want to terrorize the riches of Venezuela to their own selfish ends. And when the people are saying, this is our wealth, these are our minerals, and allow us to do what we can do, and we can sell them to you at a reasonable price, they don't want that. They want full control so that they take them out and determine the price. But I am happy and I salute the government of Venezuela and the people of Venezuela for standing firm to say, not in our lifetime, not in our country, nothing next to our resources. We'd rather die in our country and relate to countries that appreciate what we do. It is for that reason that South Africa, amongst others, relates with Venezuela at a diplomatic level, at economic level, at a social level, even at a cultural level. And therefore, like Russia and China, it is only the West really that is problematic. But I think in the course of time, we will expose them and we will defeat them. Now, when it comes to media, you know that the Western countries dominate the media. So the only thing that they carry about Venezuela into the headline is, I put it in inverted commas, the suffering of the people of Venezuela. But why are the people of Venezuela not rising against the government? It's because they know that that is the people's government. It is their government. The position that the government takes does not contradict the view of the people. Actually, what makes the government of Venezuela a people's government is because it draws its mandate from the aspirations of its own people. What they stand for is what their own people have told them. So in that way, it's unfortunate that the media, particularly the mainstream media, is dominated by the West. And I think it's something that we ought to do to turn around that situation. It is for that reason that we are relating to the progressive media of the South Americas to come and work with us here, with SABC, to ensure that we give the positive stories about what is actually happening in Venezuela. Because there are positive stories. For instance, the election system and the instruments that they use in Venezuela, they are ahead of any other nation in the world. Their system is efficient, is effective, and if it's optimal. You can't
argue that they have the best democracy in the world.
Absolutely. That's why it is a true people's government, the government that is led by President Maduro. It is unfortunate that the international finance system is controlled by the Western countries. So you know their best weapon when they don't like you. They simply devaluate your currency in order to kill your economy. This is what they have done with Venezuela. They have closed the borders for Venezuela to trade with the immediate, what you call neighbors. And they are busy canvassing the neighbors of Venezuela to militate against the Venezuelan government. This is thuggery. This is terrorism of a special type. Surely it must be condemned in the possible terms possible.
Comrade Zelani, just to add, there's been also attempts by the United States under Donald Trump to stage a coup, a foreign coup in Venezuela. They've sent their troops in Venezuela, and the most funny of things happened. They were caught by Venezuelan fishermen when they tried to invade the country. They tried to bring up an illegitimate president to declare that he's president of Venezuela. A lot of things have happened that really constitute grave violation of international law. And Comrade, you and some activists in South Africa formed an organization called SASUVE. Tell us about that organization. Tell us about that, your activities in it.
South African Solidarity Union of Venezuela, SASUVE. We decided to establish SASUVE to formally and officially pledge our support, unequivocal support and wholehearted support to the people and the government of Venezuela, because we felt what was happening against that government in that country was an undermining of its own sovereignty, was a violation of the international law, and it was something that was against the spirit of the human family. We believe that it is unfair for the United States to poke its nose to other countries' sovereign matters. And therefore, we cannot sit back as Africans, and South Africans in particular, when we see one of our friends in trouble. True friends are found when you are in trouble. So we decided in that spirit to establish formally, so that we make a concerted effort, not in a piecemeal approach, so that from time to time, we raise the plight of the people and the government of Venezuela, first and foremost to our people, to the African majority, to the African continent and to the African Union, but also to canvass support beyond the African shores to say that what is happening there is criminality. And SASUVE is that instrument that wants to rally the people of the world to support the people of Venezuela so that we can make all forms of interventions that we can make. It is not only about marching and picketing, but it is also about engaging strategically by people who think like we think, like your organization, Africa for Palestine. We want to build a very strong and a profound solidarity to strategically engage all the strategic countries that are progressive, to say, let's give support and ensure that Venezuela does not become a failed state, because that's what the West wants. When Venezuela becomes a failed state, then they come in, they take everything, they're in charge. They want to do what they have done to other countries, where they start off by ensuring that they collapse the economy in order to collapse the government so that it becomes a failed state, and then they can move in. So we want to salute the government of Venezuela for being on the alert, want to salute the intelligence of that country, militarily and otherwise, for having been able to intercept all their enemies when they try to come to even assassinate President Maduro, because many attempts are being made to take him out, many attempts are being made to overthrow that government. And as I say, they are using the neighboring states to enter Venezuela from all the angles in order to collapse that country. But thanks to the people of Venezuela for standing up and for creating a wall around their own leaders, around their own country, to protect their riches, to protect their sovereignty. Because without the masses of the people, you can't be able to do. But the people of Venezuela are very loyal, are very obedient, are very committed, and they have got tenacity and diligence to ensure that they jealously protect their terrain. In that way, we will continue to support them as SASUVE, and from time to time, we will work from this end, and from time to time, we will traverse and travel to Venezuela to demonstrate clearly to them that we are with them at all material times.
Colonel Zalani, there's a term that is used a lot, and you've touched on it, and I just want us to just delve a bit into it. What is called economic terrorism. You've mentioned sanctions. I know that at this point, multinational companies are being penalized for trading with Venezuela. Venezuela has large reserves of oil that they cannot take out of their own country and sell because of these sanctions. So just tell us about that term that is used a lot, economic terrorism. What does it entail for Venezuela and the government of Venezuela?
Well, my brother, it is already what I've spoken about. Economic terrorism is what exists in the world. It is an instrument which is used by Western powers, imperialists. They use that economic terrorism to take out any government that prevents them from laying their hands in the wealth of a country that does not belong to them. It is a colonization of a special type, but it is an instrument that is used in a manner that targets you when you take a particular view in terms of policy of your economy, in terms of policy and trajectory of your country. Then they move in, and it includes the devaluation of your currency. It includes the attack on your monetary policies and your fiscal policies. It includes undermining your whole administration by these imperialists going to all the international forums to demonize you, to erode your credibility, to ensure that they decapitate your integrity. In all you call United Nations, Davos, they talk about you in a very bad manner. So that is what we call economic terrorism. It is intended to kill an economy of a country where a government of that country does not want to agree to the terms and conditions which are set by imperialists in the international arena.
Thanks for that, Comrade. Do you believe, and does Sasulu believe that we are doing enough? Are we doing enough in South Africa to show and to give our solidarity to the people of Venezuela and to the government of Venezuela?
Well, I wouldn't say we're doing enough, because I think there's a lot that we can do. But I'm happy because the ANC, the African National Congress, which is the governing party and the liberation movement as we know it, is in full support of the government of Venezuela. And from time to time, we work together to demonstrate against the imperial forces. The South African Communist Party is also on board. COSATU, the Congress of South African Trade Unions, is also on board. So Venezuela is definitely enjoying support from the ANC and its allies, as well as the broader mass democratic movement. But I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, not only in South Africa, but in the entire African continent. We are looking at establishing similar associations in other countries of Africa, starting with the countries where Venezuela is represented. I believe that there are about 17 or more Venezuelan missions in the continent. But we want to make sure that even at a level of Addis Ababa, the seat of the African Union, we have a structure there. And we are busy with that as SASUVE to ensure that we work on the establishment of those. And I think in this current year, our target is to have at least 15 formations like this in each and every nation state, which will strategically identify, and that will include Ethiopia for its strategic nature in the politics of the world and Africa.
That's wonderful, Comrade Doran. I know that in Namibia there's one already. So you comrades are doing good work in that front. Comrade Doran, we in the international solidarity field of activism have a problem entirely when it comes to Nelson Mandela and how Mandela has been, the narrative of Mandela has been used to kind of whitewash the person he was, a revolutionary, founding member of Umkhonto we Sizwe, and so on. Now, you have worked with, you worked under the administration of Comrade Nelson Mandela, and that Comrade Nelson Mandela once got an international award of Simon Bolivar in the 1980s from Venezuela, when he was still in prison, by the way. So, Comrade, what would be the values? What would be the ethos of Comrade Nelson Mandela towards Venezuela in these days?
You mean if Nelson Mandela was still walking the surface of earth? Because we are still pretty much recognizing his existence amongst us spiritually, because he is the living ancestor to us as far as we are concerned. And indeed, Nelson Mandela is saluted as a liberator of this country, a great statesman that is recognized by everybody globally, one of the greatest human beings to have walked the surface of earth. I don't have a doubt in my mind, as having worked with him very closely and having had a privilege of always introducing him when he makes public appearance and ushering a way before he actually delivers his keynote addresses. Nelson Mandela would have been on the side of the government and the people of Venezuela. There's no question about it. He was firm about his support for the liberation of Palestine. He was firm about his support for a free world, for a free people, and for the respect of the people in their respective sovereign countries. He would have been annoyed by Donald Trump for making attempts to take out a democratically elected government of Venezuela. And Mandela would not have minced his words. He would have told them point blank, without any fear of contradiction, that stay away from Venezuela. You remember what he told George Bush when they were trying to do what they were trying to do in Iraq, which they actually ended up doing. Nelson Mandela told them that you don't think straight. You are a president that should be embarrassed to do what you are doing. So I'm trying to say to you, that was Nelson Mandela. He was original. He was independent in terms of his thinking. Many people salute him as a man of reconciliation. Yes, he is. But you must know that before we reach that point of reconciling, Nelson Mandela would have taken you to task for having done things that were out of the way. So he was very disciplined, but he was very resolute on what needs to be done right. So I think that the people of Venezuela must take joy that the ancestor in the name of Nelson Mandela is in support of them. It is for that reason that even his grandson, Nelson Mandla Mandela, from time to time, he supports the people of Venezuela because he himself represents those views. But the ANC itself, of which Nelson Mandela was the president, is fully behind the government and the people of Venezuela. So there's no question about it. Nelson Mandela would have traveled to Venezuela to meet the people and meet the leadership of Venezuela to give his utmost support.
Colonel Zelani, in your closing remarks and in wrapping up this very insightful conversation to our audience, to mainly our young audience who are students, young activists in the continent, in South Africa, in Palestine, and other parts of the world, what can ordinary people do to lend their support to the Venezuelan cause?
Well, can you repeat that question, my brother?
I'm saying to those that are watching this particular series, particularly young people, what can they do to support and to give solidarity to the people of Venezuela?
Well, there are many things that we can do. You understand that at this point that there is an outbreak of the coronavirus, and most of the stuff that we do, we need to do it online. I think people must get into online, into all the platforms of the social media to actually declare their support for the people and the government of Venezuela. One of the things that we must do is to circulate a petition where people must populate that petition with their names and their signature and begin to preface it with a message which must be carried to the United Nations, to the AU, to all other international platforms, including the countries of the West that are infringing on the rights of the people of Venezuela. If we can do things like that, initiatives of that magnitude, where we make a clarion call to all the people of the world to sign that petition, but over and above, we call upon our young people to join progressive structures like Africa for Palestine, Sasuve, Asuve, Nasuve in Namibia, all of those. We must swell the ranks so that we show cause and demonstrate by doing that indeed we are with the people of Venezuela. But I'm also calling on philanthropists that are progressive, that let's put together resources so that we can send them there. It could be resources in kind. We can send PPEs, we can send sanitizers, we can send food, we can send money, and we can use the embassies and the missions of Venezuela to make those contributions. So let us contribute in kind. Let us contribute with material resources and financial resources where we can. All of those will do a very good gesture for our support to the people and the government of Venezuela. They need us pretty much.
Thank you very much for the comments. And as you've heard, if you have a social media account, please voice your support for the people of Venezuela. If you are a member of an organization, voice your support and get that organization to support the people of Venezuela. If you're a member of a government structure or a member of parliament in any of the countries in the world, in Africa in particular, convince your government and campaign for your government to support the people of Venezuela. Thank you so much, Commissioner, for being with us today and accepting the invitation. This was very insightful. And this video will remain on our social media pages for future reference. So people who have not watched it will still be able to watch it in the future. Comrade Zolanis Sasuvia organization is on Twitter. They're also on Facebook. So raise your questions there. Also, the Embassy of South Africa in Venezuela is on Twitter as well. It's on Facebook as well. So you can find them there and you can ask the questions there. Let's raise awareness. Let's make sure that people know what's happening in Venezuela, because ignorance is our enemy. Thank you again so much, Comrade Zolani, and have a good night.
Thank you, my brother, for giving me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. The struggle continue. Amanda.
Way too.